Frankly, I have too many neckbeard experiences, and my friends are tired of my salt. I am the textbook definition of beard bait. I have been ever since I was 14, so going on 10 years now. I have been deep into anime since the ye old days of Blockbuster Video. I love games, of both the video and the card varieties. I am a regular con goer and avid cosplayer, so much so that I've migrated from just walking the floor in costume to competing and presenting at conventions. When not in cosplay, I eagerly experiment in other fun niche fashions, such as steampunk, Mori girl, and Lolita. Add to all of that my double major in environmental science and English literature, which covers both sides of the competing intellectual neckbeard factions, and a dollop of an overall bubbly demeanor, and you see why I suffer an onslaught of Neckis beardicus. Seeing that this is my first Reddit post, I thought it was prudent to start off with a low-key beard encounter that happened fairly recently. It goes a little something like this. So I play a somewhat uncommon TCG. I say somewhat because trying to find anything besides Magic, Pokemon, or Yu-Gi-Oh! In a store not specializing in cards is a shot in the dark, but I digress. And my favorite local store had very recently closed. And they do have a sister branch, only 10 minutes away, but my branch was specially for gaming. And the sister branch didn't have nearly enough stock or variety to keep me happy. So I've started a quest to find a new favorite store that isn't an hour and a half away at closest. In the most recent bout of frantic Googling, I found a store about 30 minutes away. I've never been there, but I decided to try my luck. The store seemed pretty average when I pulled up in my car. It was a basic hole in the wall at the end of a strip mall. Its windows were covered with so many gaming promotional posters that you couldn't even see in. Now, as I mentioned before, I have a pretty varied kind of fashion, but since I treat like trying out a new store like a job interview, I learned a long time ago not to make too heavy of an impression the first encounter. So I was keeping it low-key, very cute, very girly, and very not what people are used to seeing me in a game shop. I was also alone for this quest. Not ideal for sure. I do not like going into game shops alone until I'm very comfortable after years of bad experiences, but no one was free. And knowing how busy I am with my work, I knew that I wouldn't get another chance for a while, so, stilling my nerves, I left my car and proceeded with caution. I knew immediately upon entering, I would once again come up empty in my search for the coveted TCGs. It was obvious that this store was specially for Warhammer. The only cards on display was a case of Magic, with a smattering of Pokemon, and the rest of the store was covered, floor to ceiling, in Warhammer memorabilia. Now, I have no problem with Warhammer. I can see the appeal, though I've never tried it myself, but it was very much not what I was looking for. My disappointment must have shown on my face, because the cashier asked, "Is there anything I can help you with?" In a worried tone, I smiled politely and asked,
"Hi, do you have this card game in stock?"
The guy hissed through his teeth in a way that every retail worker who knows they don't have something.
"It's fine."
But he was very sweet and offered, "I can text some of the other shops I know. I can see if anyone has it in stock." Honestly, I was touched, and I accepted his offer. I decided to look around the shop to see if there was anything that caught my interest, because if the cashier was going to go out of his way for me, then I was going to buy something to make it worth his effort. I just moved to a wall covered with various figures and paints to see if anything caught my eye. Think some could look really neat when incorporated in my steampunk props. Please don't witch hunt me over this. When I heard them arrive, a whole bevy of beards shoved their way through the door in the little game shop. I'm talking 8 to 12 full-grown neckbeards of the most stringent definition. There were fedoras galore, black and red cargo pants covered in chains, and at least 4 trench coats with obvious food splotches all over, anime waifu shirts, and a hearty mix of greasy ponytails and ill-conceived middle parts. And every single one of them had some form of beard on their neck. It was a gloriously horrifying sight. They all shuffled over to the table at one side of the store, the one that was specifically made for Warhammer games, or matches. toting with them boxes of figures, as well as salty snacks and the illustrious dew of mountains. It was when they loudly started unloading their bounty of figures and munchies that I came to the realization that while they had been entering, the other two customers that had been in the shop, when I came in, had exited. I was left alone in a game shop with a bunch of neckbeards and one distracted cashier. I felt a pit drop into my stomach. This was a cringe-worthy repressed memory in the making. I already had enough to deal with. Thank you very much. Luckily, at that moment, most of the herd hadn't noticed me yet. They were being too preoccupied setting up with what was supposed to be a weekly game to pay attention to anyone else in the store. I know many neckbeards have motion-based vision when it comes to prowling for my ladies, so if I just stood still, they wouldn't notice me. But eventually, one of the grease beasts would look up from his Cheetos and see a small girl in a dress. Then they would all be onto me. I came to the conclusion that my best chance of getting out of there unscarred was to make a break for it, to the relative safety of a nice cashier man and his close proximity to the door. I still wanted his intel, but if I needed to bolt, I was going to. I took a steady breath and straightened my posture, putting on my best resting bitch face. I find that looking like you can easily commit white-collar murder and not care is good enough to deter most lily-livered neckbeards. With that thought in mind, I slowly wandered back to the front counter, hugging the wall shelves and not let my eyes stray over to the conglomerate over at the play tables. I made it to the counter with no issues, thank goodness. And I found the nice cashier guy was on the desk computer on Facebook with 5 messenger boxes opened. Then he told me, the first 3 places I tried didn't stock it, but the 4th one does, but they've only got 1 box. I'm still trying the last one, but they haven't gotten back to me. I have a pretty good feeling they have it. I thanked him profusely. Then he asked me to wait for a few more minutes to see if the shopkeeper would respond. I reluctantly agreed to wait it out. I really did not want to be in there with that horde any longer than necessary, but my thirst for those sweet, sweet cards won out. The cashier, bless him, he was a gem. He started talking to me about my favorite TCG, just about the basics, about the decks I ran, why, if I'm casual or competitive, and so on and so forth. I was happy to babble on about my cards with him, so I got into a really nice conversation with him about it. So I got really distracted by this conversation, and I didn't notice the imminent beard encounter until it was too late. I smelled him before I saw him. My back was turned to the swarm as I was having my chat with the cashier. So I didn't notice right away that there was a sudden lack of chatter. I was halfway through a sentence with a stench the likes of which locker rooms could only aspire to hit my nostrils. Now listen, I am not a shrinking violet when it comes to stink. I have 2 brothers. They have both been playing hockey since before I could walk, and they avoided showers because it was unlucky. I also had an intern in college who dealt primarily in amphibians and reptiles. Not exactly the most pleasant smelling of creatures. This smell though, it was like rancid BO in a cat box that had never been emptied, which came together and had a baby of a pile of garbage. I think my nose hairs melted to the back of my face. It was abominable. Ahem. The man said far too close to my back for comfort, the sneer audible in his voice. We're waiting to start, sir. The cringe was real, and I was deep in the thick of it. I straightened up from where I was leaning against the counter, and I turned my head to witness the absolute bearditude that graced us with his presence. This guy was more than likely the alpha beard, based on the smug look on his face, and the fact that the other beardies were all sitting at the table, looking on with horror and interest as what was going down. He was a ginger fellow, in a pair of those Hot Topic pants with all the pockets and chains, and a heavy metal t-shirt that was stretched over his generous middle. That was from a band I was too plebe to know. The fedora on his head had a smattering of skull patches, sloppily glued onto one side. I know it was glued because it was seeping out around the sides of the patches, and a red craft store feather poking out the other side. He wasn't wearing a trench coat, and I kinda wish he did, because I could see his overgrown pit hair poking out from the sleeves of his t-shirt. His beard was patchy at best, missing his chin almost entirely, looking like his scraggly pair of mutton chops got too big for their britches. Overall, he was a very gaudy sight to behold. I was still too surprised by his appearance, and he was still way too close to my back to really understand what he said. Luckily for me, the cashier was unfazed. Weekly 40K doesn't start for another 10 minutes. the cashier said without missing a beat. He pointed over his shoulder at the big digital clock on the wall. When that clock hits 5, then I'll start taking names. Everyone's already here. The great beard scoffed, flicking his chin up and making his hat plumage bobble. Stop cavorting with the female and get to your proper duties. We won't be held up because you mistakenly think you can score with a lost little waif. There was an honest-to-goodness gasp from the peanut gallery at the tables. I could tell from the bug eyes and open mouths that they had not expected that from their fearless leader. I myself was feeling a little bit off-kilter. I mean, I've never been called a waif before. Has anyone else gotten that one? I'm honestly curious. My shock quickly turned to embarrassed anger. I was so ready to rip this guy 2 new buttholes, but the cashier beat me to it. I know that I do not need to remind you about the store's conduct policies, he said venomously. Obviously, this wasn't his first clash with the Alpha Beard. What you just said is completely unacceptable. I'm giving you your second strike. One more and you're out of the tournament season. And if you want to play at all today, you're going to sit down and shut up while I help out this paying customer. That, mind you, was here before you. And then, not until after, she's done with her purchases. This got the Beardy all kinds of steamed up. His face turned so red that he looked like a ripe tomato. With how ginger he was, it almost looked like his head was on fire. Truly, it was a sight. It was clear that he wanted to escalate the situation, but his gang of groupies realized that it was a losing fight. And when they saw it, they started to beg him to come back to the table. He gave me one last glare. I'm sure it would have been intimidating if his bottom lip hadn't been quivering so much, before turning on his heels and stomping off like a toddler, back to his seat and flopping into it with a jiggle. My little sister has to deal with the same thing every time she goes to a Pokemon tournament. I hate it. Oh yeah, that store, they got back to me. And they do have the game in stock. They also have a weekly tournament if you're interested. It's just a bit of a drive.
Thank you for your help.
I said.
With the cards. And also with him.
If you really want to thank me, pretend to shop for something for a minute, he said with a mischievous grin. I want to make them wait a bit. I happily spent the next 30 minutes loudly hemming and hawing over dice and sleeves. I even had him take out some Yu-Gi-Oh singles so that I can look through his collection, audibly discussing different strategies and if I put so-and-so card with my deck. Through it all, the Alpha Beard just sat there getting redder and redder. The gaggle of sub-beards switching between looking at him worriedly and then at me, flexing my little bit of nerd knowledge that I was sharing with the cashier. I left the shop with a new set of sleeves, about $25 in rares, to start a Link Summon Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and the pinkest, most glittery dice that they carry in stock, along with the address of the next shop. On my way out, I made it a point to tell the cashier loudly,
I'll be sure to tell all my friends that play Warhammer to come and check out the shop. After all, it seems like your usual group could do with a bit more feminine ingenuity.
I ducked out of there with the sound of a furious at my heels as the Alpha Beard finally lost it. Haven't been back since, but I am curious to know if he got his last strike or not.
That's all she wrote. Bye-bye.
He was a ginger fellow in a pair of those hot pockets. In a pair of those hot topic pants. The alphabet just set the alphabet. The Alpha Beard just sat there getting redder and redder. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate all the submissions I've gotten. I am looking through them. I'm just slow. Plus also I've got a lot of things to do with my normal job. And I really appreciate all the comments, so keep them coming. Even though I might not respond, I really do appreciate reading them. Thank you very much to my patrons. It's a small service that I offer. If you want to download an MP3 of each episode, it only costs like $1 a month. I've got some subscriber stories next. And also had Hellfreezer help me out. Plus I also have some friends of the channel that wanted to help. So I can't wait to share those with you. So until next time, take very good care of yourselves. And remember, have fun with your failures, or they'll have fun with you.